Good afternoon. I'm Tom Leonard. I'm the University Librarian here at Berkeley. Welcome to our friends across the Bay. I come with two small disappointments already today. The first is that Judge Chin in New York seems to be about to take the rest of the week to issue the first statement about the Google book search settlement. And the second is that I forgot my heritage blue PLoS t-shirt. So I can't.
We have brown ones here. Yeah.
I can't advertise my views. But we are indeed at Berkeley very pleased to welcome Peter. Peter Binfield took his PhD in optical physics from Aberdeen University. He began his publishing career in the UK at the Institute of Physics Publishing in Bristol. And he moved on to Kluwer. And eventually this became, through another job, Springer Publishers, and he was always identified, in my mind, with the Springer Open Choice program. He joined us in California in 2005 to work for Sage Publications, and he has had the great good sense to now be a PLoS major player. Since April 2008, Peter has been the managing editor of PLoS One, running the editorial side and managing the day-to-day business of the journal. Peter, welcome to Berkeley. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Okay, so thanks for coming. I assume everyone can hear me at UCSF, or I'll hear otherwise. And thank you everyone at UCSF. I'm here today to talk about article-level metrics at PLoS. And so a quick outline of what we're talking about. I'm going to go into the Public Library of Science in particular and open access in general, just to give you some background of where we're coming from. Talk a bit about PLoS One, which is the journal that I understand the most. I've been running it for the last year and 3/4. And also, I think PLoS One has been a lot of the motivation behind us developing article-level metrics. And then probably 2/3 of the talk specifically about article-level metrics. The slides are going to be put up at our blog. I'll link to them from our blog, everyone.plos.org. I'll probably put them up on SlideShare or something like that. And if anyone is following along on their laptop, I'm going to be doing some sort of live web demonstrations of some pages and showing some screenshots. But in addition, if you wanted to follow along, I've actually set up a series here of tiny URLs. Which take you to the actual pages that I'm going to be looking at. So when you see a reference in the bottom right-hand corner to the tiny URL, tiny.cc/ALM, and that's a 0, and then they count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can just type that into your browser, and you'll be at the page that I'm looking at that point. Okay. So open access. Open access is specifically in this context about the journal literature. And what is it? Well, there's really 3 central aspects to open access. And these were defined back in 2003 in the Bethesda definition, which is free immediate access to the journal literature, so anyone can read it for free. Deposition in a digital public archive, and in our example that archive is PubMed Central, but it doesn't have to be. It can be any recognized public archive. And a copyright license on the content which allows unrestricted reuse. So we use a Creative Commons attribution license, which actually allows any kind of reuse, including commercial reuse, provided the original source is credited. And in addition, anyone can reuse any part of the content, so they can mix it up and mash it up with different sources. So that is the basic what is open access. Who are the Public Library of Science? Well, we're one of the largest open access publishers in the world. We're 6 years old. We're the largest not-for-profit open access publisher. We publish 7 journals, including PLoS One, which is now the 3rd largest journal in the world. We're staffed by people who have come from places like Nature, BMJ, myself from Springer and Sage. So we're all professional publishers, career publishers. And we're based right here in the Bay Area in San Francisco, right next to the ballpark, actually, and in Cambridge in the UK. There's about 85 of us, something like that, about 70, 75 here in San Francisco and about 15 over in Cambridge. And we were actually founded by 3 people, some of whom are known here. So Harold Varmus is Nobel Prize laureate. He's one of our founders, and Mike Eisen and Pat Brown. So Mike Eisen may turn up today even. So the PLoS flavour of open access, we're a not-for-profit, we're mission-driven, so we're really in it for the mission. We are online only, there's no paper anymore at PLoS, and we provide our content on an open source platform. We have a free to submit but pay to publish model. So anyone can submit an article for review and ultimate acceptance, but when they get an editorial acceptance decision, they get an invoice for payment. And for PLoS One, it's $1,350, for example. And our other journals are more expensive than that. They go up to, is it $28.50 for PLoS Biology? Yeah. But it's important to recognize there, though, this isn't vanity publishing, so ability to pay does not affect ability to publish. So anyone can actually take a waiver for any reason, although usually, of course, for financial difficulties. And if they choose not to pay, then that doesn't affect their editorial decision or their being published at all. And this is a fairly common business model for open access for those large publishers that actually have a sustainable business model. And as I said, we're under a Creative Commons attribution license, so the author actually retains the full copyright, but they basically give away all rights for reuse and the ability to take that content and do whatever you want with it, provided you attribute the original source and the original author. And as I said, it basically means everything is free to read for anyone, anywhere, free to download and reuse. And the alternative to this kind of model is what people are basically used to, is the subscription-based journal business. So effectively, this is a business where a publisher would sell a subscription to the content for an annual subscription, and therefore restrict access. So only those people who can pay for a subscription get access to it. So therefore the circulation is by definition limited to the people who pay. And it also restricts ownership. So typically the publisher actually retains the copyright. At the very least, they retain the rights to reproduce and disseminate the content. And therefore the ability to reuse and distribute that content is severely limited in that kind of model. And actually that is one of the most interesting things about open access, I think. The fact that if you allow anyone to do anything with your content, you actually free up that content and great things can happen. If you put a firewall around it, a paywall, and restrict access, then that's going to stop anyone from doing interesting things with the content. That business has about 25,000 journals worldwide, and on average they're publishing about 50 papers a year. They're typically circulating in a subscription model to no more than 1,000 major academic libraries worldwide, and often an awful lot less. I've been in publishers where some journals would circulate to only 25 subscribing libraries, for example. Although obviously that they weren't too successful, but those do exist. And it's about a $9 billion a year business, the subscription side of the industry. 4 big publishers control about 40% of the literature, and that is Elsevier, Springer, Wiley, and Taylor & Francis are the 4 major publishers there. So that is a large, well-established industry. Open access is a new venture, but it's proving to be dramatically successful, which we'll go into. So our publishing strategy at PLoS was basically to start off by launching some high-quality journals to try and put PLoS and open access on the map. When we launched 5 or 6 years ago now, there was real questions as to whether or not a high-quality journal could be published under the open access model. Would anyone submit? Would anyone read? Would anyone care? So we started off by publishing a couple of very high-quality journals. We then built that out to give us a more extensive open access publishing operation. Effectively, we're looking for an open access home for every paper. So if you only have two premier journals that are highly selective, then that's not necessarily a home for every paper. So we moved on from that. And ultimately, we want to make the literature more useful, which was that sort of reuse aspect that I mentioned. We want to make it useful to scientists and the public, and ultimately we want to accelerate science. So this was the history of what we set up. PLoS Biology was the first in 2003, just past its 6-year birthday. Then PLoS Medicine a year later. Those two are highly selective journals, so they're the equivalent of Nature or Science. They reject whatever, 95, 98% of everything that comes to them. Then the PLoS community journals, there's 4 in the middle, and titles are Computational Biology, PLoS Genetics, PLoS Pathogens, and PLoS Neglected Tropical Diseases was the most recently launched. And they're sort of run by the community for the community, and they're all great quality journals. They're all still somewhat selective, so they still have a rejection rate and an attempt to be important, prestigious journals within their field. And then you have PLoS One, which is launched 3 years ago now, just coming up on its 3rd birthday. And effectively, PLoS launched PLoS One to be the last journal that we would launch. It would encompass everything, and I'll explain how. And that is still the case and still a phenomenally successful journal. So the interesting thing about PLoS One, and that box there, we just won an award a couple of months ago. The ALPSP, as a major industry body, gave us the 2009 award for publishing innovation, which was a big deal. And this slide is actually off of that presentation. So the interesting thing that we do at PLoS One is our editorial process. So we peer review everything, and we specifically ask in that editorial criteria, is the work scientifically rigorous? Is it ethical? Is it properly conducted? Do the conclusions follow the methods? Do the methods follow the hypothesis, and so on? And if so, basically it's sound science and therefore publishable. And specifically that peer review process doesn't ask how important is the work, is it a major advance in the field, what is the relevant audience, is it the right niche journal for this topic. We don't ask any of those questions because effectively we say we'll publish anything that is science and anything that is solid, good, publishable science. What that means, of course, is that effectively we're not the highly selective journal that some of the other journals are in our group, and nearly all other journals in the world are. And we end up with a large output of content which has all been vetted for scientific validity, but hasn't been sorted into whether it's good or bad, or not bad, good or not so good. And what we try and do on the journal is we then use online tools to sort and filter content after publication, not before, and I'm going to talk about that. So the other things, so that is what's really important. The rest, which is interesting, is the inclusive scope, which is all of science and medicine. So we literally publish stuff from physics, mathematics, chemistry, all the way through the biomedical, medical, health areas. Although, to be honest, we're really concentrated in the biomedical and medical fields, because that's just where PLoS has grown up from. But the journal is also encouraging of discussion and debate. We were basically one of the first journals in the world to put commenting tools onto the articles to allow people to comment, rate, and annotate. And we still do that kind of way of thinking. We have discussion forums for our internal ed board. We have a blog. We have a Twitter feed, friend feed room page, rather, Facebook page. So we basically try and encourage that sort of Web 2.0 activity around the journal. And we're very fast, streamlined, efficient. So we publish every weekday. We publish online only. At the moment, we're seeing perhaps 30 submissions every day, 20 odd publications every day. So here's our important stats. And what this basically shows is that we're almost doubling in size every year. So we only launched December 20th, 06, so we only had 470 submissions in that week. Although I guess it did launch a couple of months earlier for submissions. But since that point, our submissions have been going 2,500, 4,500. This year we should hit easily 6,700 submissions, and the publications are tracking that. And this column is interesting here on the right, the percent that represents of the annual output of PubMed. So PubMed typically indexes about 800,000 articles every year. So at the point at which we hit 8,000 annual publications, which could be next year, we're effectively 1% of everything that's in PubMed, effectively 1% of the biomedical literature. At this size already, 4,300, that makes us the 3rd largest journal in the world, and we're just 3 years old. I have an ex-colleague at the back here who will attest that launching journals is incredibly hard in this business. I mean, really, if you can actually get 25 subscriptions in the first 2 or 3 years for a journal, in the subscription model, that's amazing. So to go from 0 to the 3rd largest journal in the world in 3 years is almost, well, it is unheard of, actually. And next year will easily be the largest. The largest journal publishes about 5,000 articles, so we're easily going to exceed that. We won that award for innovation, and we have almost 1,000 academic editors on the board now, and we've published about 45,000 authors at this point. So it's a huge operation. Yes. So that's about PLoS One and open access. And I think really everything else that I'm going to be talking about now is not actually anything to do with open access, but we're innovating it in an open access environment because our business allows us to. But the rest of the stuff, this presentation could have been given by somebody from Elsevier just as easily. So I wanted to start off just by checking that everyone in the room knows what the impact factor is and what it's about. Does anyone not know about the impact factor? Okay, and this isn't a presentation to bash the impact factor, although it could easily be one, but it's really not. So here's a question. If you wanted to buy a good baseball team, would you buy one that consistently won the World Series? Topical question, and I'm not a baseball fan. But the analogous question here is, if you wanted to buy a good journal, if you're a librarian looking to subscribe to a good journal, would you want to buy one that has a high impact factor? And bear in mind, the impact factor basically measures the average number of citations to a journal. That's effectively what it boils down to. It tries to measure the average quality of a journal. So actually, I would say the answer is yes. If you're a librarian, you do actually want to buy, the on average best journals, which means the ones with the highest impact factor. And in that respect, the impact factor has a place in the world. It's a journal level measure for the quality of a journal. So just hold that thought. So if a baseball team wins the World Series, does that actually mean that all their players are star performers? And therefore, if you're a struggling team and you want to buy some good players in, would you just go and buy any player from that World Series winning team, regardless of their performance, just because they happen to be on the team? And you can see where I'm going here. So if a paper appears in Nature, does that actually mean it was a high impact paper? So the analogy isn't quite exact, but I think it's close enough for the point. Actually, the answer, care of Nature, which is nice, is no. So Phil Campbell is the editor-in-chief of Nature, and they did an analysis a couple of years ago. 89% of their 2004 impact factor was generated by just 25% of their papers. So 3/4 of the papers basically contributed almost nothing to the average citation rate of that journal. This is Nature we're talking about. And I think that's pretty instructive. And Nature themselves are no particularly great fans of the impact factor. So it's interesting that they've come out with that statement. So I appreciate not everyone is a baseball fan. So if you're not into sport, you're into chocolate. Okay, so here's my next analogy. Is this good chocolate? It's attractively packaged. It comes in a nice box. It probably had a bow on it before you unwrapped it, and it looks very, very edible. And is that bad chocolate? It's just a pile of milk chocolate, not very attractively packaged. But which would you buy, given the choice? Presumably you try and buy the attractively packaged chocolate. And really, the analogy I'm pitching out here is that the journals are just packaging. They're just the box that wraps around the articles. And many people really confuse the packaging for the content. So the content, the stuff that actually is interesting is the article. And so the packaging, the journal brand, the imprimatur there, it's just one way of telling you if the articles inside it are any good. And it's not necessarily a particularly good way of doing that, as Nature showed. It is one way, but not the best way. Is that a good method, or would you rather trust your taste buds and taste the chocolate? And hopefully, you would agree that actually, if you want to get some nice chocolate that you like, you wouldn't just buy it on the box. You'd actually go and taste it. So after that complicated analogy, that's what we do. Basically, PLoS One tries to avoid that packaging effect. So effectively, we're publishing anything that is scientifically sound. So it's been peer reviewed. It deserves to join the scientific literature. So we'll put it into the scientific literature. It would have been published somewhere. So many articles start their life at Nature, they're rejected, they go down to the next tier journal, they're rejected, they follow this waterfall until somebody at the bottom accepts them. Because they were always acceptable. They were always, a scientifically sound article. It's just they didn't meet that quality bar that a journal might have been attempting to reach. So we don't do that. We publish anything that would have met that standard at the bottom, all the way up to the top. We publish Nobel Prize winners and people that could have been in Nature easily. We don't filter or ration the content, so we definitely reject bad science. We publish, or rather, we don't publish stuff that is clearly unscientific and that fails one of our criteria. But if it's actually scientific and good science, then we'll publish it. And we don't ration it. So our business model is interesting there. Every submission pays for its own costs, basically. So we charge $1,350. Therefore, if that covers its own costs, publishing more is not a problem. Whereas in a subscription model, you have a limited page budget. You've charged a certain amount for an annual run of that journal for, say, 200 articles that it's likely to publish. So they actually can't publish more than that anyway because their business model hasn't allowed them to do it. But we don't have that restriction. We try and get the content in front of the audience as fast as possible. So we peer review fast and we publish fast. And then the idea is that we would allow the readership to decide what is useful for them as an individual. So the point here is that an individual researcher in an individual field should be the best person who can determine whether that article is actually interesting for them, not the opinion of the editor-in-chief of Nature or the 2 or 3 peer reviewers that reviewed for Journal of Computational whatever. It's good science, that's all we checked, and then you decide whether it's interesting for you, not somebody else. Okay, which then brings us to ArticleLevel Metrics. So this is the interesting development that we've put in place. So really, we've put in place a suite of tools that are going to let us, or let the readers and the users, evaluate the article after publication and put that research into context. Okay, so a quick aside here. So when you think about it, who actually cares about research impact? And the answer is all sorts of people. So researchers care about it, of course. It's their research. They'd like to feel that they've made an impact in the world. Institutions care because they want to go up the rankings and attract more students. Librarians care because they want to be concerned about subscribing to the best quality journals that actually meet the needs of their users. The public care because they funded it via taxpayer dollars, so they care whether it's high impact or it was worthwhile. Publishers obviously care. They're trying to sell this stuff. Funders care because they're trying to fund good researchers who are going to produce good work in the future. But the point of this slide, I think, is that there's a whole range of stakeholders, and they all have different drivers. So actually, the funders are more interested in knowing whether or not somebody they're about to fund is a safe bet for producing the goods 5 years down the line if they give them $1 million to set up a research lab. Publishers are interested in just selling a subscription this year. Librarians want to meet the needs of their users. Some people might actually be more interested in media coverage than citations and so on. So there's a lot of stakeholders with a lot of different drivers. And given that, how do you actually typically measure the impact of a paper and therefore an individual? And it comes back to the impact factor. In the real world, the worth of a paper and therefore an individual tends to be judged on the basis of the impact factor that article is published in. And that is not a good method. It's really not, because the impact factor is a journal level metric, and it's just an average of what's in the journal. Why on earth should you measure the individual papers and the individual people based on that average measure? Use it for other reasons, for buying a journal, but not for giving somebody tenure or promotion, for example. So the solution then is, well, how could we measure impact if we were talking about measuring it at the article level? And you could measure a variety of things these days. So citations, for instance, are the obvious one. That's what the impact factor is made up of. But web usage, expert ratings, so getting humans to rate articles, social bookmarking, how many people have socially bookmarked this article, meaning that they found it interesting enough to want to keep for later. Community ratings, so just readers, not necessarily experts. What do they think about it, like the Amazon star ratings, for example. The amount of media or blog coverage that article had. So if a lot of people have been writing about it, that means it's some sort of hot topic, and that's interesting to someone. It's perhaps interesting to funders, but maybe not necessarily to the author. Commenting activity, how many people have taken the time to really go into that article and have a discussion about the pros and cons of it and point out problems. And of course, there's more. But the issue here is that with current technology, we can actually now do this, and we can do it automatically and fairly easily. And so we are doing it with our ArticleLevel Metrics program from PLoS. So specifically, at each article level now, we're measuring the number of citations recorded in 3 databases, Scopus, PubMed Central, Crossref, the amount of web usage, and we deliver our articles 3 ways, HTML, PDF, and XML. So we're delivering back that data to the users, and we're doing it to counter standards, which is it's a librarian standard of usage within a library. We don't yet have expert ratings, but we're thinking about that. We measure number of social bookmark events. So in the real world, a lot of people use Delicious. In the academic world, a lot of people still use Delicious actually, but that doesn't really work for us because they don't measure the DOI of the article, so we can't find what article they're talking about. But there's a couple of academic services, Cite You Like and Connotia, that researchers do use for bookmarking papers. Community rating, so our users are able to rate any given article in a star rating format on 3 different categories. Media and blog coverage, so specifically this is blog coverage. So again, there's aggregators out there that attempt to go and find all the blog articles that have been written about an article and aggregate them into one place. And Postgenomic actually is the best one at that, we've found. It's actually a Nature product, but they go out and automatically find all the blog articles about a specific article and then aggregate it to the one record. And then we have commenting, which is notes and comments. So people on our site can leave a note on an individual piece of text, a word or a sentence or a paragraph, or they can leave a comment on the entire article, and those things form a discussion thread, and I'll show you some screenshots in a minute. Okay, so it's important to know here that article level metrics, I think everyone just jumps on this and assumes it's all about usage, and it's not. It's citations are probably the most important, the highest quality signal indicator of whether or not the article is good, but it's citations and usage and a whole basket of other things that we've pulled together that may or may not be useful for any given stakeholders and may or may not actually have value when you do an analysis of it. And we're doing it for every single article in all of our titles. So although perhaps the driver was PLoS 1, because in PLoS 1 we don't make that judgment call of how high quality it is, we're using this for our entire portfolio. And we're the first people to do it, really. So other publishers do elements of this, and again, I've got some screenshots, but we're really hoping that other people will adopt this concept of giving a whole range of measures of metrics and try and figure out some standards and some way of understanding it. Okay, so the way we did it is we basically started out, we launched it in March this year, and in September of this year, we added all the usage data. And at that point, we sort of felt that it was a sort of 1.0 release. So we started off by acquiring and presenting all of that relevant data. We make sure that we use data that isn't owned by third parties wherever possible. So we try and get the data via an open API that we don't pay for and that nobody else would have to pay for. We're literally just sucking information from free sources and just pointing back to it. So there's still there's a quid pro quo there. So the third party gets traffic coming back from our site, but we get the information out of them for free. And the next phase is going to be providing data analysis, filtering tools, that kind of thing. So you can imagine what we could do next is when you run a search on our site, you've got the option to rank the search by number of citations or number of downloads or number of bookmarks, just like you would in a shopping comparison site, for instance. Okay, so if there's anyone following along on their laptop, the URL to go to is that tiny.cc/ALM1. And they always tell you never to work with children, animals, or the live web, but I'm going to give it a try. So because I think it's actually more impressive to see it in action. So this is that same article there. This is an article we published early in the run of PLoS 1. And this is the article here. So there's the text of the article in HTML. We provide PDF download and XML download and so on. But we have several tabs to each article now. So if you click on the metrics tab here, this is where all the interesting stuff lives. Okay, so you saw that graph built. So under the metrics tab, the first thing that you see is the number of article views. So this particular article has had almost 1,600 views broken into these types, HTML, PDF downloads, and XML downloads, since its publication date of May 07 through until today. And if you were to hover over each one of these points, you see it gives you a little pop-up of the detail of that month. So in September 08, it was downloaded 12 times as PDF, for example. So that's nice, straight off the bat. Going down, you see we've got some summary data over here on the right. So there's the total article views. This is the number of citations. And then it has the number of star ratings here. But the real detail is lower down on this page. So citations here. Scopus, which is a database run by Elsevier, actually competes with the Web of Science, has found 9 citations this article. PubMed Central has found 3, and Crossref has found 5. So Crossref is actually an industry body that actually issues DOIs, but it also tracks citations. So, for example, as a user, if you were to click on this Crossref 5, you go off to a landing page, which again builds dynamically, and there are the 5 citing articles for this one as found by Crossref. And then if we go back, PubMed Central would do the same. And Scopus, this is interesting. Scopus is a subscription database, in fact, and strictly you should have to subscribe to see that data. But there's a deal with the API that basically, if we send them anyone via this API link, that person can see the first 20 citations for free. And then they get a warning message saying, you have to subscribe to see the rest. So at least they see the first 20, which is great. And it's a high quality data source. But there's the 9 articles they found that cite that one. And of course, the issue here is all of these databases are non-unique. So they have overlapping data sets and different ways of finding the data. So as an author, the way to find all the citations that your article has got is to deduplicate this list. But potentially there'll be a solution for that down the line. User ratings, if you were to click into here, there's been 2 people leaving user ratings, and you click in and you see all the details. And in fact, these 2 people chose to leave 5 stars for everything, which is pretty much standard actually for our star rating. It's not terribly well used, we found so far, and whenever it is, it's usually 5 stars or 1. They either love it or hate it, and we don't allow them to leave 0 stars. But we've had some nice things where the author's mum has come and left 5 stars with a nice note saying, "Oh, my little son, it's such a great paper." But you can basically drill into that and see all the details. And all of these star ratings, they could have left a text comment as well explaining why they had that rating. You go down, the comments and notes. So this paper has had 8 comment threads and 7 note threads left on it. And these all sit under this tab up here. So there's 8 plus 7 is 15. But if I were to click here as a user, I go to that tab. And assuming it's still working, here we go. So you get a page with all of those comment threads and the threaded responses. So this one here, there was a back and forth with 1 original and 2 responses, for instance. And again, I'll go into some detail in a minute about how well used that is. Going down this page further, the next interesting thing is the bookmarked. So how many people have socially bookmarked this article? And again, I would say this is an indication of future use of this article. If an academic is using Cite You Like as their reference manager and they've bookmarked it and 3 people have, it probably means they thought it was interesting enough to want to read later or to use as a reference in their next paper. So this potentially gives you an indication of the future citations or the future use of the article. And again, if you click there, it's a landing page at Cite You Like, and Cite You Like is a free service, totally free. But for example, here are the 3 users, Neuroscience Group, iPlant, and R. Crane, that have all bookmarked this article. And these are the tags they've used to bookmark this article. And I can click through here and see everything else that R. Crane has bookmarked and what tags that person typically uses the most. And I can really drill down and start to find what that person was interested in and perhaps whether it was related and relevant to this article. So I'm not sure how well people use that sort of social discovery route, but it's there, and if more people were to use the social bookmarking services, it becomes a much more powerful thing. And we do have quite a few articles that have as many as 50 or 60 people who've bookmarked it, would appear here. And then Postgenomic, this is this blog coverage aggregator. So again, this site has gone out and found 7 blog articles written about this article, and it gives you a landing page. Again, this again is a totally free service. And there are the 7 blog articles, and you would click on each one of those to click through to the actual blog. So the sum total of all of those indicators and metrics, we would contend gives the user a rich amount of contextual data that really explains to them what's going on in that article, and whether or not other people have found it useful or found errors in it with the comments, whether or not people who are studying this are also studying something else. So you can really drill down through this stuff and find out some interesting data. So going back to the presentation. Oh dear. So these were just these are screenshots in case I didn't have live internet. Okay. Okay, so here's a nice example. So that is what ArticleLevel Metrics looks like on our site. Now, here's a sort of live example of it in action. This article was published on 15th of September. And again, I have this up here. This is this same article. So this is only, not even 2 months old yet. In the normal run of things in an academic article, as an author, you would actually have very little idea of how interesting your article was to the world until people start to cite it, 6 months, a year, 2 years later. And then you realize, oh, somebody did actually read it and they did care about it, and there was actually, some interest in it. However, right now, we've got much more immediate information. So look here, 32,000 article views, 42 user ratings on this. So if I click into this metrics tab, okay, so again, here's the graph, just 3 points on this graph because it's a brand new article, but it's showing how the interest has built up over time. And as of this month alone, and what are we, we're only 9 days in, it's had 848 views already, this article. It's had 21 comment threads there, and these are somewhat substantial discussions going on. It's not just great job, although a lot of it is that, and it's also not blog comments, flame war style comments. We do moderate this stuff, so anyone can post, and actually it goes up straight away. But then we will pull down anything that's offensive. But there's, again, there's, I disagree with this, and there's been a discussion going on there, and there's a lot of comments here from actual people who found this article useful. 42 user ratings. There's the 21 notes. 51 people bookmarked this article in Site You Like. So I think we would say that, I've spoken to the author about this, this proves to them, from day one that actually their article had impact, and in what way it had impact. They now have got some immediate recognition and immediate feedback that simply wouldn't have happened in the previous world. So again, these are the screenshots. And this was actually an article from the Times Higher Education about that article. And they pulled out the fact, when they wrote this piece was downloaded more than 20,000 times already, suggesting it has struck a chord in the academy. Putting the usage data like that on an article is extremely rare in the publishing world. So this is interesting development. So that's ArticleLevel Metrics. And so now I'm going to go into, how you get at it and how you can analyze it. But at the bottom of each article, you might have seen this link, download raw metrics as XML. So when you're in a specific article, you can click on that link and download all of the article level metrics for that article in a single XML file, which is great if you know what XML is, and it's also specific to the one article. What we also do, though, and here's a link to it, we provide a summary Excel file of this data, and it's a massive Excel sheet that took me weeks to put together. It's 23 megabytes in size. It has about 8 tabs, and it's got basically all of the article level metrics data in there for all of our articles. It zips down to about 3 megabytes, so you can actually download it. But that data set looks like this. So it's just a massive open data set with the summary information of absolutely everything that we're providing. Also breaking out for each article what are the topic areas of that article, breaking out the month-by-month views, HTML, PDF, XML. And again, I can show that in action here. So this, for instance, is, here we go, PLoS genetics. So there, for example, in October of 2005, this particular article in HTML received 520 HTML views. And then that data builds up month by month over time. And it's just a massive data set. Okay. So people have been taking that data set and doing interesting things with it already. It's only been up there since middle of September. But people have basically been attempting to evaluate it. And what we've given people as a pointer for this is this website, which is article-level-metrics.plos.org. And that looks like this. Okay, so this website is what our marketing department refers to as a mini website. This is the web equivalent of a nice glossy flyer. Basically, it has 4 pages, and you just scroll between. It's an entire domain of its own, but it just has 4 pages of information. But it's the first point of call for people who want to know about our articles, or rather our article level metrics. So within here, it's got the brief information of which services we're linking to. It gives some caveats as to why you shouldn't necessarily believe any of the data that you read. For instance, online usage is dependent on the age of the article, the subject area it's in, whether it had press coverage, and so on. A call to basically crowdsource the evaluation of the data. So we would like people to actually take this data off us and evaluate it for us. And then we've had some user feedback already, which actually I'm going to show in a minute. Okay. So that is where you sort of, this is the raw data, this is how you get to the raw data, and then once you get into our site, we've got some pages that basically give you some contextual summary. So that the issue really is, if nobody has provided this kind of download data in the past, how do you know whether it's good or bad, the numbers? Because you don't know whether 30,000 is a high number or a low number. So what we've done here is provided some summary tables for all of our journals. So for example, this tells you that in 2006, PLoS Medicine published 145 research articles and 342 non-research articles. And that as of the date of this table, which was end of July, the average download of a research article published in 06 is 5,200. And so as it gets younger, so it's in 2007, the average download is 5,000 because it's had a year less data to build up. But then you see there's a blip there in 2008. So actually the average download of paper published in 2008 as of today is about 6,900. And presumably that means there were some very popular outlier papers of some sort, but you'd have to drill in to determine that. But it gives you, if you're an author, an indication of whether your article is high or low, or also a reader. I'm reading this and it has 500 downloads. Does that mean it's good or bad? And it means it's bad, of course. But if it has 30,000 downloads, that's a good number in this context. And we've also then given the same data drilled down to subject areas. So underneath medicine, they published in 2006 69 articles in the area of infectious diseases. And that data, the average download number of an infectious disease article is 5,700, 4,700, and 4,000 for an 08 article. So again, we're trying to give the users some context there. What has also happened, which is interesting, so that's all on our own website. People have gone off and taken our data, and primarily that spreadsheet, and started to do interesting things with it, like put it into an open source environment. So one particular person here, Mike Challen, has taken our spreadsheet and put it on GitHub, which is an open source development site. And now, I mean, this is somewhat ugly, but it's basically an advanced search field for all of our content, drilling down into each article level metric. So you could use this if you were to follow that link and literally drill down with a drop down and give the numbers, and find the specific article in the specific journal from the specific year that has more than 500 downloads and less than 3 bookmarks, and so on. So that's interesting. And it's interesting why he's doing it. It's great though. What he's also done is taken the same data and made some visualizations. So this is very cool. IBM has this product, Many Eyes, which is a data visualization website, and you can dump large data sets into it and do all sorts of interesting visualizations. And he's done exactly that. So this, for instance, is a table showing the article citations per day by publication year. So for instance, for this one here that I was highlighting when I took the screenshot, this was a PLoS Genetics article that's had 0.3 citations per day since it was published, and it was published in 2007, and that's the title of the article. And that is the most frequently, or the article with the highest citation frequency over time, I guess. And you can drag these sliders around to show you slightly different views, and you can also drag the sort of swivel data sets across the top, which is rather nice. Another one he did here was the article downloads per day. So again, in this, the central spot, the biggest spot, is the article we have published with the most number of downloads per day, and the color indicates which journal it's from. So it's from PLoS One, and actually I forget which article that was, but actually no, I know what it is. That was our Darwinius article. We were the ones that published the Darwinius Macile Ida article, which Google changed their homepage for, which was rather nice. That got obviously a vast number of downloads, and it's fairly new. What else has happened with people evaluating the data? So some people have gone out and tried to evaluate the commenting data, and this is interesting. This again is somebody from Nature, somebody called Ewan Adey, and he took all of our commenting data and screen scraped it off the site. But in the raw data format, it's just a comment. It's just a text string about the article. So it doesn't actually tell you whether it's somebody being insulting, somebody actually having a debate, somebody giving interesting information. So he took all of that screen scraped data, put it up on a crowdsourcing site, and just asked people to go in and rate each comment, and here's the text of that comment, as to what type of comment it was. Was it a fragment, a direct criticism, a comment from the author, and so on. And he took that data and did some interesting analysis on it. So, for instance, this says that, if we look at this box first, 18% of all of our papers have some sort of reader or user-generated comment on it, and this is PLoS One we're talking about now. If you were to add in all the comments by PLoS One staff, and we leave things like corrections or review text on there, that goes up to 39%. Very few comments of the wow, that's great variety. A lot of comments from the authors, 40% of comments are from authors. 17% of the comments are some sort of journal club or analysis or an interpretation. 11% are people requesting clarification from the author, and so on and so on around. So the bonus links are a link to a related website, for instance. So I think this shows basically that people are using it in the way we would like them to. I mean, this is high quality commenting going on the site. There's just not a great deal of it, roughly 1 in 5 articles. But even given that, that's actually a higher proportion than the most other publishers who have this, or probably all other publishers that have this facility, are seeing. So there's a lot of commentary going on by comparison to other publishers. We would definitely like to increase it. And how has this program been received? So if you want to know how something's received these days, you go to Twitter. Okay, so I like the metrics of PLoS. This might be a better way for rating of articles and journals. Look at the metrics, and this is actually one of the best articles in PLoS Medicine for downloads. So they're obviously seeing that article, spotting that it's got a high number of downloads or citations, and twittering that. Too bad MAQ, and this is Medical Anthropology Quarterly, I think, which I guess not the most widely read of journals, but too bad MAQ doesn't publish the number of downloads like PLoS does. Is it because the numbers are too small? They're ashamed of their numbers, and I mean, it's not because nobody else is doing it yet, but you could definitely see where it's going here. I mean, if PLoS can do this and provide those numbers, why shouldn't anyone else? And here's some interesting quotes. So the PLoS article level metrics are a substantial value add for authors. As an author, I would love to see this kind of service. That's from a librarian. This is from an author. Your innovation of the article level metrics is an extremely promising development. We are hopeful that this will transform the way that impact is assessed for published articles. And this is just from somebody who doesn't have a relationship with us, but he's a fairly big name blogger. As paying customers of commercial publishers, should scientists and their funders be demanding more of this information in the future? I reckon they should. So this is great positive feedback. Basically, we've had universal positive feedback for this program. Somebody now is, in fact, several people now are teaching PhD courses in basically information literature literacy. So this particular PhD course is in India, but it's a course on scientific writing. Nayaz Ahmed is actually one of our academic editors, but you can see he's got a whole module on citation evaluations, article metrics, impact factors. And it seems to me that this, if you look at the content of this course, this is the kind of course that any grad student, PhD student should be almost required to take these days. I mean, you should have an information literacy course that tells you about some of these issues that we're discussing. And And I think this course, he told me, is like 48 people. It's packed. People are begging to be allowed into it, which is interesting. YouTube. You're nobody if they haven't made a YouTube video about you. But we launched the usage metrics, and like a day later or 2 days later, this guy, Dr. Alan Kahn in Leicester, basically put up a video on YouTube. It's a 2-minute video that basically steps you through a lot of those features that I just talked you through, and evangelizes about how great it is. As with so many other things, PLoS is to be entirely commended. Kudos to PLoS. So that was nice. So that is the article level metrics that we've launched and the kind of reaction they've had. Where are they going to go next? And there are already people out there doing bits of this. We didn't invent citation numbers or usage metrics, but I think we are the first publisher to sort of take them all together and put them in one place and attempt to start a movement there. But there are people doing individual bits of this. So this is the Frontiers series of journals, which are open access. Frontiers in Neuroscience was their first one. But if you go to their site for each article, they actually record all sorts of things. Total views, which is what we do, but also total visitors, new visitors, returning visitors, total time spent on the article. So these graphs tell you how long people actually spent reading the article, which is obviously a measure of how interested they were to read it on screen. This is the faculty of 1,000, which a lot of people may know about, but this is a third-party service. It's a subscription product, actually, which you may or may not subscribe to. You do? Yep. So they have basically expert academics, and they have about 7,000 now, that go out and rank articles. And so this is just a screenshot of some of the PLoS articles that have been ranked. But effectively, this is the expert evaluation of articles. It doesn't matter where they were published, but this group, with their consistent methodology, attempts to decide whether stuff is good or bad based on human interaction. And in fact, somebody from the Wellcome Trust did an analysis and published it in PLoS One. Somebody called Liz Allen, my colleagues, we have a colleague called Liz Allen, but it wasn't that one. So somebody from the Wellcome Trust went out and evaluated whether or not Wellcome Trust funded papers were high impact or not. And they basically did an internal analysis. They got their own experts to rank all of the papers that came out of their funding. And they found a very strong correlation actually with faculty of 1,000. So faculty of 1,000 was picking up a lot of the supposedly high impact papers that more experts would within the Wellcome Trust. Institutional repositories, I think, is important to mention here. So David Palmer runs the IR at the University of Hong Kong, and which seems particularly progressive in the way they're thinking about this. And I asked him for a nice quote about why article level metrics are so important, and he wouldn't give me one. He said, yeah, they're important, but what's actually more important is the ability to show author level metrics and institution level metrics for him as an institutional repository. So they're going out and trying to aggregate for their author, each author in the institution, how many citations they've got and how many papers they've published, and then roll it up to the institution. So I've got a nice example here of somebody doing that in the publishing world. The Association for Computing Machinery, this is in beta, but they're apparently launching it by the end of the year. And they have a massive database of computing machinery, publications, and people. And it goes back a long way, in this case back to 75, but I think quite a bit further. And they also have a large ANI, abstracting and indexing database. So it's not just the stuff that they've personally published, but it's they've got a database of everyone publishing in that field. And so what they can do now is for an individual, and they've got apparently a pretty clean database, they can roll up for this person. He's been publishing since 1975. They've recorded 40 publications for him. He's recorded 84 citations. 26 are available for download, which presumably means that it was published by ACM themselves. And then here's his rolled up usage stats of those 26 articles that they have on their own platform. So they're basically already trying to get that data down to the author level. And these are sort of pockets of people doing this. What is needed maybe is standards and things, but this is great. This is the University of Tasmania institutional repository, and IRs typically have pretty good statistics actually. And here's an example of statistics by month downloads, but also the number of unique countries, for instance, where it came from. So 28 unique countries, and if you were to scroll further down that screen, they've got quite a bit of rich data on their download information. So that's rolled up to the institutional level. And so what are the next steps for us? And I'm nearing the end, bear with me. So we're going to be adding more sources for each data type. So right now, we have those sort of 5 or 6 different types of data, but typically only, 2 or 3 data sources for each one. And then they still need deduplicating, and they're obviously not comprehensive. But the more you get, the more comprehensive you're going to get. So, for example, we're going to add blog coverage in the next few weeks. And researchblogging.org is one of the highest quality databases for that information that we know about. We're going to be adding new types of data. So the ones I listed are sort of, they're version 1 type of measures, but there's some very interesting things going on out there. Factory of 1000 I mentioned, but Mendeley is fascinating. So they've been founded by the people who founded last.fm, which is a big music recommendation site, pretty popular in Europe. But basically they want to create the last.fm for academia. And they've got a citation manager, a reference manager module, piece of software, that is very powerful and allows people to collate their references and analyze and collect their library of PDFs. But what they're then going to do is basically analyze the behavior of the people who are using that database. So if you've bookmarked certain papers in your Mendeley database as being something you might want to use in your next paper that you're writing, which you can also write within that environment, then that's interesting information. It's not just a social bookmark. It's a bookmark of somebody who's then using it to write a paper. And if they can get around the data privacy issues and anonymize it and bring that data out, it would be interesting for us to know on one of our articles there are 10 people within the Mendeley universe using this article to write their next submission, for example. And Mendeley are also going to be able to get at the people who like this or also like that, your friends like this, that kind of data. So I think that's a new data type. That's not just a social bookmark. That's a way of mining user behavior to give you new information about your articles. Like I said, we're going to put data analysis tools on top. This isn't PLoS only, so I gave quite a few examples of other people doing similar things. And we're really attempting to roll this out to other publishers. So everything we've done, we're telling people exactly how we've done it. We've documented it. We're willing to give the API information to anyone because it's all open and free. And publishers just need to come to us and ask for it. alm@plos.org. So just email us and we've got all that. Also the actual database software, the one that goes out and queries all these APIs and brings them in and then serves them back out to our platform. The intention is to make that an open source piece of software as well. So at the moment, it just hasn't been documented well enough to make it open source, but that's the intention. And we hope to develop and adhere to any standards that evolve. So Counter is a standard for usage counting. And what we did already was present that data to the Counter standards, even though they don't actually apply at the article level. They apply at the journal level and only from within a subscribing university. So we took the spirit of their rules and used that, but they're working on new article level standards. And NISO is an industry standard standards body, actually. So we're hoping to work with people like NISO to develop standards for social bookmarking. So if you go to a publisher site and see a number of 15 social bookmarks, you can be confident that that number can be compared against any other publisher. And then you can see where that would go next. I mean, there's no reason why people couldn't collate all that information into a central database and compare publishers much more easily and articles within them. So that's where we're going next. And so we really think, that we're basically at the start of a pretty important new development in academic publishing. If people can sort of kick this addiction to a journal level metric and really worry down to the article level metric or the person level metric, I think that's going to revolutionize the way people think about research and about publication in general. Tenure committees would be able to act very differently, for example, and not just count up the number of publications in a ranked journal. And to misquote from Jerry Maguire, I think authors and academics are going to be coming and show me the metrics. So I think as a reader, people are going to be demanding to see these metrics because it's there. As publishers, we have all that data and it's easy to compile. It's just a development job to put it up on the site. And as readers, you want to see that data to decide whether it's any good. As authors, you want to know whether your publication experience was worthwhile going to that particular publisher and whether you got what you needed. And that is my presentation. So that's article level metrics in a nutshell. Thanks. Any questions?
What you're doing is really, really impressive and really exciting. I can just imagine that there will be more and more metrics that you can devise and make available to. How are you going to evaluate the usefulness of any one of these metrics and decide whether to keep them or
Yes.
combine them in certain ways? Because that can be sort of overwhelming for people to
Yep.
sort through.
And I mean, at the moment, we're sort of not at that level of worrying because, we've only got a handful of each one.
Right.
But I can see where, down the line you'd need to worry about that. And I mean, we're actually really quite hoping that people will go out and take our raw data and analyze it and tell us which are the most useful metrics. So, for instance, we for the blog coverage, we use post-genomic nature blogs and blog lines. And if you actually look at the raw data, nature blogs and blog lines have hardly any data at all for any article. So, in effect, we could already retire those two data sources because they don't add anything new. But it would be nice if people were to do an analysis and say, this is a low quality data source. The error bar is too broad compared to the average, that kind of thing. I mean, at the moment we have no plans of how we're going to do that. We're sort of making it up as we go along from that point of view. But yeah, ideally, you want to use several data sources to get the data, and then somehow deduplicate it and compile it into one number per metric, as it were. At the moment, we're just showing the raw data. Anybody in UCSF?
Pete?
Yep,
Pete, can you hear me?
I can.
Yes, this is Marcus at UCSF. Is there any plans to sort of show the metrics by country or by region eventually? I know that this is just version 1.0.
Yeah, and again, actually, I mean, no current plans, but it's an obvious next step for us. There is another publisher out there, Hindawi, which is one of the other large open access publishers, and they actually do that already, in the sense that you can go to a page on their site and type in what university you're interested in, and the page will show you all of the authors, reviewers, academic editors from that university. And that's useful in an open access environment because it shows you perhaps the value of your institutional mandate that you may have funded with a publication fee, for example. So I think we would like to do that. Not yet on the plans. One thing at a time, I guess. Yeah.
Also, Pete, if you could repeat the Berkeley questions for us here.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
Yep. Any Berkeley questions? Yes.
What's your biggest surprise been so far? A surprising success at one of the metrics you've rolled out, or
Yep.
lack of success? I'm curious.
So the question was, what is the biggest surprise of success or lack of? One interesting surprise actually was that Darwinius Macilli paper that I mentioned. So we also have Google Analytics on our site that measures usage to Google standards. So we happen to know that article on Google Analytics had done well over 100,000 downloads in the first few days, basically the first week or more. When we crunched all of our usage logs according to these rules, the number came out to be perhaps 35 or 40,000, the equivalent number. And so the interesting thing there was the rules that we were applying, so the counter standards. And they have a standard in counter that it's called the double click rule. So you can't download an article too frequently, otherwise it's felt to be gaming or something like that. So or it could just be somebody's browser is slow, for example. So they created this rule that if the same IP range tries to access an article within 10 seconds, that only counts as one. So if they hit it once, then 9 seconds later they hit it again, that counts as one, not two, because it could have just been an error. They just clicked the button. So what we think actually happened there is that that particular paper had a big press to date. It became public at a certain moment in time, and everyone in the world started hitting our site. And as far as our site is concerned, certain IP ranges within, say, Berkeley, all look like the same IP range. And so there might be people in different offices all over Berkeley hitting that article at once, and we're excluding a lot of those because of the 10-second rule. So a surprising thing was that the way you define the rules actually defines the data that comes out the other end of it, which is in some respects obvious, of course, but it was quite instructive in that sense because I've been telling the authors you had 100,000 downloads, and now they go to the site and it says 40,000, and it should say 40,000 because we're being very careful to only report that data to the rules so that you can compare it against other places. So that's interesting. I think the other interesting thing is, yes, some of these services that we thought were quite highly used are just not. So Postgenomic, for instance, is much more highly used to be a blog aggregation site than Loglines or Nature Blogs. And within the social bookmarking, there's only two players, Cite You Like and Connotea. And it appears from our data that Cite You Like is dramatically more used than Connotea by users. Another interesting surprise was once we drilled down and we actually got this data out of what are the accesses between HTML and PDF and XML. That was interesting for us because we sort of assumed that everyone was using the PDF, but in fact it's not. I mean, the ratio, I don't know the exact number, but it's almost 100 to 10 to 1, HTML to PDF to XML. So the vast majority of people are actually reading it on screen, and perhaps for only a few seconds, I don't know, but they're not clicking through to download the PDF. So the amount of PDF usage was perhaps lower than we'd expected. And I've come from publishing environments where they often don't provide HTML pages. They only provide the PDF, which is, it's not very electronic publishing savvy of them. But in those environments, the PDF usage is all there is.
Have you looked closely at how much time people are spending on those HTML?
No,
pages?
again, we haven't.
That's the next big
it's all
question.
there in our log files, of course, but we just processed it for this one specific set of output data. But you've got people like those frontiers in neuroscience that actually do give that as a live dashboard on the site. So again, there's no reason why people couldn't start analyzing that data. Yep.
Pete, could you talk a little bit about author reaction? For instance, now, the whole world can see whether anyone or no one looked at their paper and didn't use it. Have you gotten any feedback from them on that?
Yeah, so the question there is, has there been any author reaction for authors who basically don't get any use? And actually, no. It has only been out there about 5 or 6 weeks, but we've had a lot of author reaction from people who are highly downloaded. And they come to us with a sort of innocent question of, I see I had 30,000 downloads. Is that a good number? It's like, yeah. But nobody has come to us and said, well, it's only been downloaded 300 times. That's a really poor number. I'm disappointed with your ability to publish my paper. I'm never coming back to you. And they could have that reaction, but they could also just admit to themselves that, in fact, it's either not an interesting paper or it's in a very niche area where there are only 300 people in the world. And so that's why we try to give all those sort of contextual tables, the comparison tables, because 300 could actually be a good number in some fields, and you just need to be aware of what the good number is. But actually, nobody has complained about the poor numbers yet. Any UCSF questions? No? Anybody here?
Hi, Pete.
Oh, yes.
Hi. No, I think everybody here is very shy, but we all really like your talk. I don't know if Jerry Maguire has a C in his last name. I think it's just MAQ. That's an important point. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll check Wikipedia. But I had two hands here though, actually. So
okay. Yeah. Berkeley, go ahead. But people from UCSF will need to go up here. I think it's a little. Yeah. Thanks.
You had a
I just
question?
had a question about Cite You Like and Connotea.
Yep.
Do you know, and I haven't checked for this, is there any research out there that gives an idea of how broad the adoption is among academics and researchers, people actually using this? Because
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you're going to end up with some somewhat skewed data, because there might be a few early adopters and you're going to see what they're interested in.
So the question was
Just
how
wondered.
widely adopted is Cite You Like or Connotea, and are they just early adopters? And I think you're right. I mean, it is an early adopter crowd. And when you see in the data which are the articles that are most highly socially bookmarked, it's often in the sort of bioinformatics areas. So, it's the cool kids who like to play with these toys. There has actually been some data. So FriendFeed is a service that a lot of academics in that sort of, early adopter crowd use for discussions. And for that, they can actually set up their feeds from their bookmarking services. And one of the major feeds is actually Delicious. And so somebody, I forget who, actually it might have been UNAD again, had published an analysis of how many of each feed had been sort of registered within FriendFeed. And Cite You Like came out by far the highest. The problem with Cite You Like is that it's not an academic service, and they don't actually record, for instance, the DOI of the article, which is what we need to do a lookup via our automated API. So although hundreds of people might have bookmarked it in Delicious, without some sort of clever computational workaround, we will never be able to find that. But yeah, blogging was an early adopter community until recently, and now it's becoming more mainstream. So these things are taking off. And you have one over there.
Yeah, I was wondering how many resources you've had to put into the monitoring of comments.
Yeah, so question is how many resources on the monitoring of comments, and a fair bit. So we get alerts every time a comment is posted, and then we attempt to read it and check that it's okay. The problem we've got, of course, is we wouldn't want something libelous to go up and stay there about somebody falsifying their results, for example, and for that to enter in some way the public domain. And so we want to be quite prompt with pulling it down, which means that actually some of our staff try and resource that over weekends, for example. And so Sharp is here, and her boss does check comments over the weekend. So it's a part-time resource basically within editorial. So we get alerts and we check and we pull them down as and when. But the level of commenting is low enough that we can do that. And we constantly have discussions as to whether or not we should put sort of other moderation in. The comments are moderated before they're posted, for instance. So it's sort of a battle, ideological battle. It's not very open of us to do that kind of commenting, but also our platform isn't really set up for that kind of thing. Yeah. Nobody else? No? Well, thank you everybody for coming. And the slides will be up at some point via the everyone.plos.org blog. Thanks.